Welcome to another Waverley Garden Club video. Tonight we're speaking with Jack Lafferty from Groundswell Gardens Company. He's their maintenance manager and doctor of gardens there. Jack is a qualified horticulturalist of over 20 years experience. He trained in Queensland and spent most of his career there teaching horticulture and developing his very successful landscaping business. In 2018, Jack came to Melbourne and worked with Vasili's Garden and Cafe. You may have seen Jack on some of Vasili's television programs or heard him speaking on Southern Radio's Talkback gardening program. Jack will give us some insights into current gardening practices, including pests and diseases, what to do in winter, and some home remedies that you can make up for yourself. Enjoy the presentation. Here's Jack.
Hi folks, my name's Jack Lafferty. Today I'm going to talk to you about problematic issues in your garden in winter here in Melbourne. The first topic I'd like to talk to you about are pests and diseases, what you will encounter in your garden at this time of the year. Depending on what you're growing in your garden, you will have a variety of chewing or sucking insects that you need to look out for, whether it's the veggie patch or your garden beds. Here's some helpful tips that will help you eradicate pests. First of all, I'd like to talk about pest eradication in your veggie patch. It's very important to, if you are growing a veggie patch at this time of year and you're fortunate enough to do that, to companion plant. And that's simply what you're trying to do is disguise the crop that you're growing. What you want to be doing is mixing your crop up. Instead of planting things in rows, mix your crop up with a variety of pungent herbs, flowering annuals to deter and distract any potential flying or chewing insects in your garden. Some of my favourite home remedies to use to control these insects are simple things like chili and garlic sprays. Also, the use of natural sprays like pyrethrum will benefit your plants to no end. In regards to snails and slugs, I like to use a combination of two methods, and these methods are using coffee grounds to protect my delicate herbaceous vegetables. I sprinkle around my vegetables, creating a bit of a mound so when the snails and slugs go over the top, it dries their undersides out and the acidic content in the coffee grounds will in time knock them over quite quickly. Another dual barrier that I like to use is crushed up eggshells. For them it's like going over glass. So it's a double preventative, and it's a good way of controlling them as opposed to using nets, which are also useful, but it's a lot more time consuming putting these together. Now, getting onto diseases in your garden at this time of the year, we will start experiencing a lot of fungal issues. With a lot of moisture in the air and the coolness of early morning winter mornings, the likelihood of fungal issues are ever present. So what I like to do is be proactive in the garden, and as we're coming into this cooler weather with moisture in the air, use a good eco-fungicide on your delicate plants. Particularly things like roses, citrus are another shrub that will suffer from fungal issues. And the best way about going about that is using an eco-fungicide or a home remedy that I like to use, which is unpasteurized milk. Make sure it's organic, make sure it's warm. The enzymes in the milk and also the fat content will help protect the leaf. And I'll apply that after rainfall, and I just make sure that I keep that up to my plant regularly to keep those fungal issues at bay. Now, another way that I like to treat certain insects, particularly sucking insects in my garden, another method that I like to use, believe it or not, is methylated spirits. I make a mixture of 50% methylated spirits and water, and I spray directly onto the pest. Now this is very handy and useful for things like aphids and scale. The methylated spirits, when it is diluted, will burn the insects on contact, so it's an instant death. But do make sure that it is diluted to that 50-50 ratio with water. It's another really effective way. I use it also on my indoor plants, so it's a good way of, if you've got some in the cupboard, an easy way to apply that, making sure that you do get that right down into the crown and work it over the stem and potentially any flowering plants. Now, some other methods as well for controlling insects. I've talked about garlic and chili sprays. The benefit with a garlic and chili spray is that it has that aroma that instantly will deter most insects. Your flying variety of insects will have generally poor eyesight, and they rely quite heavily on their scent of smell. When you see moths flying around, their antennae is moving above their heads. That's them trying to work out the scent of what is down further below. So when we talk about our vegetable patch, about using pungent herbs and flowering annuals to bring in not only good predatory insects in to take care of the bad guys, but what you're also doing at the same time by using a chili and garlic spray, that smell on the leaf and the garlic is a great way of deterring them. I always go about mixing up my remedies as well, so I won't exclusively just use one product all throughout the year. Pests will become immune to a particular insecticide, so forth, like a organic insecticide. So imagine it like you and I eating toast every day of the week. We're not going to like it, you know. So mix it up. Mix up your insecticides, and it's a great way of just doing it yourself. So with the chili and garlic spray, just simply get 4 large chilies. Make sure that you deseed them. Put them in a pot with 4 cloves of garlic, cut them in half, on a low boil for about half an hour. Let it cool, strain the chilies and the garlic out, put it in a litre of water. So I should have probably said, make about 500 mils of water in this mix as you're adding your chili and garlic. Then add another 500 mils, have a litre of this. Now what's important with this, and a lot of insecticides as well, is adding some biodegradable dishwashing liquid. That will help as a sticking agent. As we know, there are a lot of plants out there that are water repellent. When we spray just natural water, it runs off the leaf. The few drops of dishwashing liquid that you put in your insecticides will act as a sticking agent and keep that on the leaf. It's very, very beneficial in other methods too, when we actually treat fungal issues as well. Naturally, you can get rid of aphids on your roses just by using dishwashing liquid as well. But again, don't use it exclusively, and mix your insecticide prevention. Now another natural remedy that I do like using, and it will save yourself a lot of time. When it comes to treating a lot of insects and pests, when it comes to white oil, you can go to a good nursery and pay quite a reasonable amount of money for a good white oil. So a good way of making up your own white oil is quite simple. Again, in a litre of water, you're going to add 200 mils of vegetable oil. It can be the cheapest vegetable oil. Don't waste your good olive oil in this. If you've got something cheap enough, 200 mils of vegetable oil, and fill the rest, 800 mils, with water. Then all you're doing is using your biodegradable dishwashing liquid, just a few drops in the container. Give it a good shake, agitate it quite well, and it's ready to use. Fantastic to use on anything that's chewing or sucking. It'll smother their body, causing them to dry out and die. Now you will notice that in time, if you don't use your solution, you put it back in your garden shed and take it out, that oil will settle on top. All you need to do is just agitate the mixture again, and you're good to go and spray. Now for those of you that are lucky enough to have citrus trees, and nearly every second Melburnian does have a citrus tree, you may have over time discovered those dreaded little galls in your stems of your citrus. They are the dreaded gall wasp, and they're in very big numbers at the moment in Melbourne, and they will attack any of your citrus trees, not just lemons and limes, but every citrus tree possible. A great way to deter them there's a few little methods that I like to use, and they can be sticky traps. I like putting sticky traps up in my tree, but the understanding is knowing when these insects will emerge. So in late winter, it is important, and you can make your own sticky traps. I'll get to that in a minute. But sticky traps, and also what you want to be doing coming into winter is do not prune your tree. You should have pruned your tree in the middle of autumn. Now, depending on what citrus it is, there are certain citrus trees that will fruit at other times where other trees aren't. So depending on what tree you have, after you've finished harvesting the majority of your fruit, that would be the ideal time to prune. And the reason for this is, as we come into spring, that's when the gall wasp will emerge. Now, the gall wasp is a tiny little wasp. It's 3 millimeters in size, but the female is a prolific breeder. She can lay up to 100 eggs, and being so small, they don't travel too far. So there's a high chance that they'll come back to your tree. This is why it's advised coming into spring that you don't prune your tree, because all you're going to do is encourage that big push of spring growth right at the time when this gall wasp is emerging. It will attack your soft, new, delicate foliage. You won't know that they're there until you actually hit autumn. As they grow inside the soft stem, the galls will get bigger. So the best thing to do if you've got galls is slice open the gall to dry it out before they emerge. Put some sticky traps up. Now, you can buy these at any good nursery, or you can make your own. And a method that I like to use, and check this out online or go to any good nursery, it's a product called Tree Guard. Now, Tree Guard's a horticultural glue. It's non-toxic, and all you need to do is apply it onto a bit of hard plastic surface, put a hole in it, and just hang them on your tree. Now, it is important that knowing that there is a cycle with your gall wasp. It starts at spring. Roughly when the temperatures are about 22, 23, 24 degrees, they'll start emerging. So as a preventative, you want to get these on your tree before then, say about mid-August. Now, it has a cycle of about 3 to 4 months. So that is the time you really want to get in to protect your tree. So applying this horticultural glue to either side of a plastic surface, hang them in your tree. Remember not to prune, and more importantly, don't fertilise your tree. It sounds crazy, but out of all the trees that we generally, and shrubs that we'll fertilise, keep that away from your citrus. The reason, again, if I fertilise my tree is going to take that nutrient up and put on an abundance of new growth very quickly, again, as it's emerging. So what I tend to do, I try to give my trees supplementary feeding. It's coming into spring. It's going to need a little bit of food to get by. So what I'll give my tree is a little bit of potassium and calcium to help it on its way, and then just watch out for any magnesium or iron deficiencies as we move through spring. Now, the ideal time to fertilise my citrus tree is after the gall wasp event. So after the females have got out of the tree, are looking around. As soon as they go into dormancy, I'm going to feed, which is going to be roughly early January. That's when you can reward your tree and give it a good quality fertiliser high in your NPKs, which is very important for your plants. NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. Make sure those levels are reasonably high, because your fruit trees, and anything that's flowering for that matter of fact, will appreciate a really good high quality and a good dose of NPK as it's moving through its growing period. So that's one way of controlling it. Another little simple way of controlling it too is with apple cider vinegar. Now, you can get these apple cider vinegar. You can get what I like to use, the little baby food jars, little glass jars with the tin foil lids. You make a little hanger out of the lid, pop a few little tiny holes in there, and put some apple cider vinegar in it. But sizable enough holes that the gall wasp can get in. So use something like a bamboo skewer. That's going to be good enough. Now that will attract them. They're highly attracted to the sweet smell. As soon as they get in this jar, they can't get up and they'll drown. And being a glass jar, you can actually see how many you catch. So I like putting about 3 or 4 of those up around my tree. Now it is important, going back to our sticky mats, to take them down as we're feeding our tree in January. And the reason for that is all of our beneficial insects will start emerging in bigger numbers at that time. So most importantly, like our bees will start coming out in bigger numbers. So it is important to get them off the tree, because we don't want to jeopardize our good pollinators in the garden, because they do so much good work for us. We need to protect them. So after that period of time, you should have a happy, healthy citrus tree, free of gall, meaning that your tree is able to produce better quality fruit quicker, without the disruption of having these nasty galls which act like clots, not allowing the nutrient and the moisture to get to our fruit and really slowing down the growth of our fruit. Other issues that we can encounter are situations with our lawns with weeds, compaction and a lot of moss in our gardens. Now a simple way, well, it's actually not simple, but a little bit of hard work, you can have a perfect lawn. So generally, if you're seeing a lot of moss and a lot of wintry weeds in your lawn, it's basically telling you that you've got a bit of compaction going on, or poor drainage. So a simple way, a remedy of this, is apply some gypsum to your lawn. It'll help soften up the soil. It'll start breaking down the clay, and generally as well, if you keep on top of your maintenance by mowing regularly with a catcher, you're going to stress the weeds to the point where they eventually will give up. Most of your weeds in your lawn will try to come up, produce a flower and offset the seeds. But if you deny this and keep up with regular maintenance, the weed will just give up over time and just shrivel up and die. Now, another great way that I like treating weeds in the most organic fashion, I don't like using any poisons whatsoever, is using some iron chelate. A lot of weeds do not like excessive amounts of iron. So what that will do over time, if you spray 2 or 3 in regular intervals, is it'll knock your weeds off, not only at that time, but it'll also green your lawn up. The key here is don't use it too much. Just assess the situation as you're going with your lawn, but that will knock off your weeds and green it up. So iron chelate, mix it to the specifications on the bottle. It's a great way of controlling your weeds. Now, getting back to the gypsum, what I like to do at this time of the year is apply gypsum, a generous amount. I top dress all my lawns once a month. I let it weather in. Now, if I do this for 3 to 4 applications over this wet and cold season, by the time I get to spring, my soil has already started to soften up. And then I get into my fertilising regime, which I run through spring, autumn and summer. Now what I like to use on my lawn is chicken manure. At that time, as we're coming into warmer weather, chicken manure works wonderfully well. It has just the desired trace elements, perfect for lawns. It won't burn your lawn. And more importantly, you're putting organic matter back into your soil. So as you feed your lawn, the manure, the pellets, the chicken pellets, you can use seaweed as well, will create a subsurface of humus, which is moisture retentive, and not only that, will give your plants nutrients. It's about this time, as we're coming into late winter into spring, that we want to start lifting our catcher when we're cutting. We want to be able to get our lawn nice and thick and spongy. Now this is a real big key to a healthy lawn. You see, if I have a thick and spongy lawn, not only is it great for high traffic areas, it's not going to die back so quickly, but it's going to hold that moisture, create a healthier root system within my grass, and more importantly, it's going to be dense enough not to allow any seeds to penetrate through my grass and into the soil, because even if it does, the seed then has to somehow work up through that darkness and capture light. So organics, it's a simple way to do it, but just with a little bit of effort and hard work, it can be achieved. The basis of having a healthy lawn and garden is very important, and where it comes from is the soil. I can't stress this enough. If your soil is healthy, your plants are going to be healthy. So the importance of using organic, anything that you can get your hands on, worm castings, coffee grounds, straw, whatever it may be, manure, add that to your soil, particularly your garden beds and your veggies. I generally will add that as a top dressing coming into spring, because I feed my soil, not my plants. If I can reduce what I'm having to purchase and using chemicals to enhance synthetic chemicals to enhance the growth of my plants, I tend not to go there. I'd rather keep anything that is organic and that can be broken down. For instance, eggshells. I mean, they're calcium. Calcium's great for leaves. So adding all these elements together, I like seeing it as I'm making a cake. So the more little bits of elements that I'm putting together, the better the cake. So do apply that, and if you're fortunate enough to have a compost heap, add all your organics, mix it through, and add that as a top dressing, twigs, leaves, everything like that. You can add that as a top dressing and also as a mulch coming into spring. Now, the importance of all of that works in ways of not only actually giving nutrients back to the soil via the microorganisms, you're creating all that living matter underneath your soil where they're feasting away and breaking down your organics with whatever you've used. So you've got aeration that they're helping with. They're fertilizing, so you've got free fertilizer. You've also got the ability for your plants and their roots to move quite freely into areas. So all that vigor within the root system means that it's going to transform upwards. So more growth. Now, this can take time for some people that have very poor quality soil, whether it be clay or whether it be sandy soils. But adding that organic matter in, the sandy soils will add more humus and moisture, nutrients into your soil. With clay, it'll help break it down as well. So you see, manures and compost will help balance your soil. When we look at soils, generally we'll find that when we have sandier soils, they'll be on the slightly acidic range. Heavier clay soils are quite alkaline. So this is important by adding these organics, because when we do that, we don't have to change our pHs by adding elements of, say, like sulfur or ammonia or dolomite or lime, anything like that, just to up and down the pH. So adding those organic matters in will balance your pH out into and it's the best way of doing it over time, into a nice neutral situation, because as we all know, your plants have a desired pH. If they do not have that desired pH, the ability for your plants to take these nutrients up where they do need it will be lost, and therefore you'll have a struggling plant that's not prolific in leaf, fruit or flower.
Thank you, Jack. That was so interesting. I've got that many questions I want to ask you. Can we ask a few?
Yes, certainly.
Our garden is covered in slaters and millipedes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are they doing any damage, or are they just kind of hanging around?
They'll be doing you no damage whatsoever in your garden. Basically, what they're doing at the moment is feasting on the organic matter in your garden, so whether that's leaves, fine twigs. Millipedes are a very important aspect of a healthy garden. They will get in and help break down the fines, the organic matter. So you will see a lot of your millipedes around a lot of leaf mold and broken down organic matter. So breaking down that matter and the excrement back into the soil is a good way of fertilising your soil. So they're not doing any harm at all.
Oh, thank goodness. I'll just wash them out of my lettuce leaves. Now, in the veggie patch where the seed, if you allow a plant to go to seed,
mm-hmm.
do you think the seed will be true to the original plant that you bought?
Generally it should be, providing that the seed that was growing into a seedling hasn't bolted too quickly, like hasn't formed into the vegetable or the fruit, that it's bolted very quickly and turned to seed. There are times where if that happens, too much nitrogen in the soil can occasionally revert the seed back to its original genus. So it can happen, but it's highly unlikely. And even if you did collect those seeds and you went about planting them out in some seed raising mix, you'll probably find that 95% of them are going to come back true.
Oh, that's good. We'll go back to collecting the seeds.
It's a great way to grow.
Now, I've trimmed the trees. I've put the clippings through the mulcher. Is it safe to put that green mulch? You say put a lot of mulch into your garden. Is it safe to put that green mulch directly onto your garden, or will it change?
Definitely not. Definitely don't be tempted to put. Look, in situations you can put small amounts. But generally, I won't do that. I'll try to obviously break down that green matter quite finely. I mean, the finer it is, the quicker it's going to break down. But because it's green, there's a lot of gases and things like ammoniums and so forth are very, very hot. You may have noticed that when you cut your grass and you put fresh grass into a pile, go back there 3 or 4 days later, shove your hand in there, feel that heat. So you don't want that, because that could damage the subsurface roots of some of your delicate plants. So it's not a good idea to do that. In other situations, particularly when you're dealing with things like leaves, it has a tendency to have nitrogen draw up. So it'll take nitrogen out of your soil. That's when you'll start seeing yellowing. But generally, I like to collect all my green matter and put it in my compost heap, and I'll turn it over. Remembering that you do want to have more of your carbon element of material, which is your browns and like your twigs, your anything woody. You want twice as much as that as you would with green. So that applies to vegetable scraps as well. So more carbon, twice the amount of carbon as to green. So put that in your compost heap.
What about dry autumn leaves? Into the heap or onto the garden?
Well, again, the benefit of having smaller pieces, smaller organic matter, I like to actually shove it out into the lawn and run over it with the mower just to break it down, because it'll condense down to a smaller area and it will be much more available to your plants. So anything that's dry is fine to use in your garden, but as I said, the benefit of cutting it down fine means that you can apply that to your garden and it's not going to blow away and it's not going to look messy. So it's more available to your microorganisms in your soil.
Terrific. Thank you, Jack.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Jack. I really enjoyed that, and I wanted to show you this. I really liked your bit about the citrus, because I thought my citrus tree, my lemon tree, was very happy and healthy, but I got this poor little deformed lemon. What would have caused this?
The way that looks to me, that could be an older lemon. It possibly could have been formed at the start of spring. Now, this is probably 2 or 3 things that could have happened with this lemon. First of all, I touch on environmental. When, as we know, we've come through one of the hottest summers on record, followed up by one of the wettest autumns on record. So if your tree's not well mulched, it can stress your citrus tree or any fruiting tree to the point where you do see these deformities. The molecules within the skin will just dry up. So when that water is more available and as the temperatures cool down, that moisture is then put back into the fruit. And as you can see on this side here, you can see that initial part here, that would have been the initial part of the fruit. And as that moisture's come through, you can see that it's tried to fill out into its natural shape. So look, it could be environmental. That's why the importance of mulching your tree and keeping your trees, particularly your fruiting trees, nice and cool and moist through spring is paramount. You don't want it to get too hot in that root ball area or too dry. So keeping it nice and cool and regulated is a great way to having good fruit. Now, the other thing that possibly could have happened to this as well is showing a deficiency possibly of phosphorus, a lack of phosphorus and calcium within your citrus. They're 2 very important nutrients for your citrus amongst all the other trace elements. When I think of phosphorus, for me, as again coming back to NPKs, it is a very, very important nutrient to have with your fruiting trees. Phosphorus is responsible for good fruiting, for good good size fruiting, also good root development as well. So maybe a lack of phosphorus in your soil, and that can be remedied by buying some liquid superphosphate and applying that at the first sign of seeing these deformed fruit. And just to safeguard that as well, just make sure it's mulched as well. The other thing that may be a little bit is calcium as well. So calcium and phosphorus deficiency can cause deformed fruit. But as you mentioned, Mel, the rest of your fruit was quite okay after that. So to me, it probably indicated initially it was saying, Mel, please give me some food as I'm coming into flowers. So things like potassium, nitrogen and phosphorus is very important with citrus fruit.
Great, excellent. Well, I will apply that when the citrus gall wasps have hatched.
That's right.
So I don't want to put on that new growth. And you said calcium, so thankfully my girls are laying, so I'm going to save all their eggshells, crunch them up nice and fine, sprinkle them on, and
yes. You want to be applying it also around the drip line of your tree. This is important because that's where all your feeder roots are. Don't just throw it at the trunk of your tree, because all those new roots are out around the drip line of your tree, and that's where they're going to take the nutrients up. So when it comes to feeding, that's the best place to apply any of your fertilisers. But just do remember with your citrus, they are very heavy feeders. So give it a really good fertilising. Again, 20 years ago we'd fertilise in spring, but because of this really problematic issue with the gall wasp, fertilise early January and then follow that up fairly regularly. Like, again, I love chicken manure. I'll give it once a month, a couple of generous handfuls. And the reason for that is just it's not strong, but it keeps them kicking over. It keeps giving them that little bit of nutrient, adding organic matter back into my soil. And so it is important to keep up with regular feeding of your citrus, and you'll get good fruit.
Fantastic. I can't wait to see my harvest next year. I think it's going to be the biggest ever. Terrific. Well, thanks, Jack. Thanks again for coming along and sharing your tips. We really appreciate it. Well, I think that's a wrap. So thanks again for watching our second online meeting, and we hope to see you soon. Hopefully you've learnt something and enjoyed the presentation, and it's really inspired you to get out in your garden even though it's freezing cold. See you soon.